Hello, and welcome to the Gateway House Weekly Podcast. This is Manjeet Kripalani, the Executive Director of Gateway House. This is the second episode of our podcast, and today we will discuss the impact of the coronavirus on energy and, in particular, on India's clean energy plans. To discuss it this evening, we have three experts: Amit Bhandari, Energy Fellow at Gateway House, and Dr. Chaitanya Giri, Space Fellow who also looks at emerging technologies. And we have a very special guest with us this evening, Hormuz Sarabji, the editor of Autocar India. And for all the petrol heads in the audience, you know who he is. So let me start first with you. Welcome, gentlemen. Let me start first with you, Amit. The government of India intends to pursue electric vehicles with aggression, both to help India meet its climate change commitments, as also to reduce its dependence on fossil fuels in the post-coronavirus era. You can read the Niti Aayog report on this, but is it really what India needs? Are the necessary raw materials for batteries accessible in both the near and short term? Can India readily abandon oil, newly cheap, and from a region which provides jobs to our expatriate population? Amit, I will start with you. Oil is at $30 a barrel. Do we really want to take away our oil dependence now that it's so affordable?
Well, Manjeet, the answer in short is no. By electric vehicles, we are trying to solve a problem which actually doesn't exist. Or to put it another way, Elon Musk has created a beautiful answer, and we are all now trying to find a question that it can address. So in the form of oil, we have an energy source that's reliable, that works, versus electric vehicles, which are an iffy and an unproven option. EVs have captured popular imagination because of the high-end cars for the super rich in the West. But most of India's oil is consumed as diesel in heavy trucks, and electric mobility is not technologically viable here. Now, if I were to go back 20 years, there were actually real concerns about availability and price of oil, and which is no longer the case now. If we are to adopt electric vehicles today, we will be duplicating hundreds of billions of dollars worth of oil infrastructure that we have created over the past century. Does India have that kind of money? And more importantly, in the current scenario, where companies are struggling to stay afloat, to survive, and to pay wages to their existing employees, do we want them to write off billions of dollars worth of assets and create something from scratch? In the form of oil, we have a well-established supply chain that has worked well for 70 years. If we go for EVs, we will be looking at new materials, each of which comes with their own complications. There is also the issue of 8 million Indians who work in the Gulf who will lose jobs if we shift away from oil. And finally, what is the question that EVs are trying to address? If it is clean air, then compressed natural gas is probably a better solution. It uses existing supply chains, existing raw materials, and we have it now.
So thank you, Amit. Chaitanya, on the batteries that Amit has been talking about, their raw material Okay, we seem to have lost Chaitanya there for a minute.
I'm here.
So let's move on. Good. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Chaitanya,
So
on the battery
front,
the new material that creates, yes.
Yeah.
Is it a new dependency for India, as Amit said?
It is completely a new dependency. I'll start by making a very strong statement, and which will really convey my message that pursuing electric vehicles at this point of time very aggressively is akin to falling into a black hole called as the Chinese economy. Now, why do I say that? The Chinese have been pursuing EVs because they have enormous amounts of lithium reserves in their own backyard. And this is something that they are capitalizing on. And if we shift from fossil fuels into EVs, then we are actually pushing the Chinese exports of lithium or their value chain added lithium batteries that are manufactured in their own factories. But beyond China, a lot of electric vehicles will require a heavy amount of rare earth minerals, especially the heavier version of rare earth minerals, lithium again, as well as cobalt. Now, where are the other sources? Lithium, apart from China, will have to come from Australia, which is one of the biggest reserves of that element. And in the past, in terms of coal, we've had a lot of problem procuring coal from Australia because some quasi-environmental lobbies had created problems in that particular supply chain. Another area where we can get lithium from is the lithium triangle, which is a geographical region that is present between Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina. Now, that's a very long logistical distance for us. The third source is Democratic Republic of Congo, which holds about 70 to 75% of the world's cobalt reserves. Not much to say about, but we don't know much about Democratic Republic of Congo, and its internal geopolitical stability is a big question mark. So we really don't want to create a new set of dependencies by over focusing on EVs.
So let me move over to Hormuz then. Hormuz, the geopolitics clearly show that you're right about the EVs not being suitable for India at this time. And why then is our government pushing for it?
Well, geopolitics is one thing, but I think the overriding factor that all nations are pushing for EVs fundamentally is pollution and emissions. That is the main reason. India, of course, wants to reduce its dependency on oil. But let's address the emissions part of it first to understand, where the EVs are in the, let's say, in the emissions profile. Clearly, from a tailpipe standpoint, they are better than any fossil fuel car because at street level, they don't emit anything. So pollution really is not an issue. But having said that, the internal combustion engine has fought back. And with the new Euro 6 regulations or BS6 regulations, and which will be tightened to BS6B, emissions also has been hugely addressed. Right now engines are getting so clean that they probably, the emission coming out of a tailpipe is probably cleaner than on the AQI on a bad day in Delhi. So clearly, I think emissions is being tackled even by the internal combustion engine. What the internal combustion engine can't tackle is CO2, because when you burn fossil fuels, CO2 automatically comes out. CO2 isn't toxic, but it's a big contributor to global warming. So that really is one concern. But the point is, in India, when let's say 70% of your energy production is from, let's say, again, fossil-based fuels or coal, gas, that sort of thing, where again, there's, let's say carbon emission, it kind of just moves the CO2 production from the tailpipe to the, let's say, energy source. Again, in that sense, unless, you increase your renewables, renewable sources of energy, CO2 isn't going to be addressed largely. So the point is, then the other point is on the cost of oil. Clearly, it's down to $30 a barrel, maybe even less, but these are really unforeseen times. And even if it goes up a bit, it's fine. And I think, frankly, if you get to a situation where you are the last man standing using, let's say fossil fuels, obviously there's going to be huge benefit to that as well. If you're one of the few customers left in the world, you will get a good price, as far as it goes. So I think on the dependency side, I'm not too worried on that. It's more on the emission side. But having said that, looking at the way it's panning out, I think, it's India, frankly, we've lost the race to China. We need to carve our own path. I think we moved to a new emission standard. There's so much more we can do in cleaning up the air, and that is to maximize the new BS6 fuels, which is 10 ppm of sulfur, and even the new engines. That automatically will have a huge impact on air quality. We need to get the old vehicles out. And all that will have a far bigger impact on emissions and pollution than, trying to pursue EVs at this moment, which very few can afford. And let's face it, EVs are for rich people. And unless the government subsidizes it, which I don't see them doing, again, the optics are not good for subsidizing cars which are and bikes which are super expensive. That's not going to happen. So then it's going to be left up to the manufacturers and the consumers. And frankly, the economics really don't add up there. There are a lot of problems with EVs. So while it's great to talk about EVs, the ground reality is that it is just not practical, affordable to have them right now. So I think the way to think, what needs to be done is companies need to focus on the core, which is still the IC engine for the next couple of years, and watch how EV development progresses. Because sometimes it's better to have a second mover advantage. You don't know how the technologies are going to pan out. You're going to be investing in lithium batteries, setting up huge plants. People might move to supercapacitors. It's very dynamic, very fluid. Technologies are changing all the time. So you want to be ready when you see some stability in the way the technology is panning out for EVs, and then maybe jump in at that time. So what I say is, it's better to have a second mover advantage in the EV race.
Thanks, Hormuz. Chaitanya, Hormuz spoke about CO2. You've written a whole paper on carbon and how we should do a proper carbon capture. You've talked about hydrogen. In fact, you've written an article in Hormuz's magazine on the methane economy. Tell us a little bit more about that. Hydrogen is a good option. Does that science work?
Yeah, it certainly works. It might be expensive at this point of time, but it is something that we should really pursue for the long haul. Hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe. And if we start to use it as a fuel, then it is also the most cleanest of all. Nothing can get cleaner than hydrogen. But currently, the entire global hydrogen production is very much tied to the production of compressed natural gas. So hydrogen is picked up from the methane that is present in the natural gas. That methane molecule is cracked, and it is cracked into carbon, one part of carbon, which is in the solid form, and 4 parts of hydrogen, which gets converted into 2 parts of hydrogen gas molecule. And that's how the system works. Australia, Europe, the huge petro companies in the Midwest, in West Asia, American petroleum companies are heavily invested in finding cleaner and cheaper solutions of converting natural gas into hydrogen. And if that makes way, we have a fuel not just for running our vehicles on the planet, but somewhere else. But having said that, hydrogen fuel even today is very expensive. But at the same time, an oil company like Indian Oil Corporation has done the trick, and it has demonstrated technology where it has blended hydrogen with compressed natural gas, and that has become a fuel for public transport. So that means a much cleaner version of the CNG that makes our buses run. So hydrogen is the fuel for the future, and this is something that we should watch out for.
Terrific, thank you. So Amit, apart from the low price of petrol, how can countries like India change the geopolitics of energy to its advantage? Hormuz said we have to have second mover advantage, last man standing. How can we take advantage of that? New benchmarks, new groupings, how will that work?
Yes. So Manjeet, historically, from the oil shocks of 1970s and all the way to the commodity super cycle of the last decade, India has worried about supply security of oil. We were always worried that oil supplies to India may stop. The events of the last 4 or 5 years, and especially the last few months, have shown us that oil suppliers should be equally worried about demand security. And with its already large market and expected growth, India is going to be one of the key providers of this demand security. How do we leverage on this status? One, we should invest in oil fields in oil-rich countries so that we are not affected by price movements. We should also get the oil-rich countries to invest in the downstream assets of our country so that our fortunes are tied together and both of us get protection against price fluctuations. When we look for hydrogen in the future as a source of energy, having these tie-ins will prove very useful. Second, the global oil market has shifted from the West to Asia. And this is not reflected either in the oil benchmarks that we use, Brent and WTI, or in the financial trade in oil, which is carried out in the US dollar on exchanges in London and New York. So India needs to create a new benchmark which reflects our consumption patterns, an Indian basket or an Asian basket. And we should aim to create a vibrant oil trade on an Indian commodity exchange, a petro rupee, if I may say so. So this will make energy prices more transparent, which is beneficial to users and producers. And it will also help create a global role for the Indian rupee in line with India's growing economic stature.
Well, that sounds like a good reconstruction or a new construction plan for the post-COVID era. Hormuz, you get the last word. if India has all these plans on the one hand, or can have them, then we have Indian companies, Tata Motors, which owns JLR, which has just bought into China's Chery. Why is that? I mean, they are doing electric vehicles there. What does it mean for the company? Is it a diversification strategy? And what does it mean for India?
Well, actually
For the industry.
they have a joint venture with Chery, and fundamentally that's to manufacture cars there, because the only way you can do it is by having a joint venture. So I think the reasons to go into China are obvious. It's a huge market. In fact, the bulk of JLR's profits come solely from China. So it's not just, there's no electric, let's say a Focus electric play here. That of course is part of it, but they're there to sell their whole range of cars, which they locally produce over there and pay less taxes on the locally produced cars vis-a-vis the imported ones. So I think, I think the compunctions for going to China are quite different. But I think, electric is actually for manufacturers, it's a really challenging one, because they have to invest now and it's a bit of a punt also. They have to invest billions of dollars in the hope that EVs will become more mainstream in the future, and that's generally the projection. But all companies have a very finite amount of resources, and not only do they have to invest in electric, they have to invest in engines as well, because that's where their profits are, that's what the customers want, and that's where the maximum margins are. So it's really a big conundrum for a lot of manufacturers. And I think, clearly this crazy push towards EVs by governments, by NGOs, even by consumers, everything on social media, people who love to talk about it, but they don't frankly buy it in the end, is really creating a huge pressure on auto companies to take the EV route to show their so-called green credentials. Frankly, a lot of this is what I call environmental grandstanding, this whole EV bit, because there really is absolutely no absolute proof to show that, the impact, especially on CO2, has really been benefited. Yes, it will come, but I think there has to be a balance between lives and livelihoods, even in this case, because clearly, if you're going to, let's say, push EVs down manufacturers' throats without any subsidy, a lot of them are going to go bankrupt, and there'll be no companies to produce them, and frankly, there are no people to buy them. So this whole thing of pushing manufacturers to produce vehicles that the public really can't afford or doesn't want, it's a bit crazy right now. I think there needs to be a more calibrated approach, and I think in India's case, we need to, as I said, have a second mover advantage. We are a poor country. We run on fuels like diesel. Diesel has become super clean now, especially with the fuel quality being improved and the emissions being improved. And we should take benefit for that for the next 10 years as well. But unfortunately, what's happened, what the auto industry has done in record time, which is to go from BS4 to BS6, it's not even being acknowledged. And now everyone's talking about EVs. So, I think this can really break the back of the auto industry, which already is, struggling right now, given the state of the market. And, even Supreme Court or judgments, which really are quite, to be frank, quite illogical in the way they've handled the move from BS4 to BS6, not allowing BS6 cars to be sold, even because of the lockdown, only a small percentage of it. I mean, that's a separate discussion altogether. But I think clearly, the challenge really is that the auto industry is at breaking point right now, and shoving legislation down their throat, which is expensive, and the customer doesn't see any benefit in it, and frankly, there is no benefit in it, is really not in anyone's interest.
Thank you, Hormuz.